So, last year I had the absolute privilege of reading Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. So, this novel is based on historical events that took place on the Texas-Mexico border in the 1850s. Blood Meridian is an epic novel that traces the fortunes of the kid, a 14-year-old Tennessean who stumbles upon the nightmarish world in which the market for Indian scalps is thriving. Now, the story is told through the kid, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's about the kid. He stumbles into this gang, and the gang is made up of a lot of peculiar people. And the story kind of focuses on those different individuals. It weaves the story around them. It follows the kid, and then it follows other members of the gang. It ultimately comes back to the kid. But I think, as most best books, you don't necessarily learn all the lessons from the main character. Now, the most peculiar person from this gang, and the person who I definitely learned the most from, and who I found that when they had any scenes or any dialogue or soliloquies, I learned to really dial in and focus as much as I could on those, was this character called the Judge. Now, the Judge is described as this tall, pale, hairless man. Basically, my takeaway from it is he's the devil. And every time he spoke, there was big lessons to be learned. And I think the biggest one by far is this one, okay? So on about page 207 here, basically the Judge throughout the book has been seen, he keeps journals, and he goes to different places. He takes leaves of plants and animals, and he always adds them to his journal. Like, he'll make a little stamp, make a little note, make some kind of way of remembering every artifact, every flora and fauna he comes across. So that's what he's doing one night here. Page 206. It goes, he pressed the leaves of the trees and plants into his book and stalked tiptoe the mountain butterflies with his shirt outheld in both hands, speaking to them in a low whisper, no curious study himself. And then this character, Toadvine. Toadvine sat watching him as he made notations in the ledger. Holding the book towards the fire for light, he asked him, what was his purpose in all this? The Judge's quill ceased in scratching. He looked at Toadvine and continued to write again. Toadvine spat into the fire. The Judge wrote on, and then he folded his ledger shut, laid it on one side, pressed his hands together and passed them over his nose and mouth, and placed them palm down over his knees. Whatever, he said, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge, exists without my consent. He looked about in the dark forest in which they were vivicated. He nodded towards the specimens he'd collected. These autonomous creatures, he said, may seem little or nothing in the world, yet the smallest crumb can devour us. Any smallest thing beneath yon rock out of man's knowing. Only nature can enslave man, and only when the existence of each last entity is rooted out and made to stand naked before him will he properly suzerain of the earth. And then Toadvine asks, well, what's a suzerain? He says, a keeper or an overlord. Why not just say that then? Because he is a special kind of keeper. A suzerain rules where there are other rulers. His authority countermands local judgments. Toadvine's bat. The Judge placed his hands on the ground. He looked at his inquisitor. This is my claim, he said. So he's touching the ground. He's basically like, all of this belongs to me. This is my claim, he said. And yet everywhere upon it are pockets of autonomous life. Autonomous. In order for it to be mine, nothing must be permitted to occur upon it save by my dispensation. Toadvine sat with his boots crossed before the fire. No man can antiquate himself with everything on this earth, he said. The judge tilted his great head. The man who believes that the secrets of the world are forever hidden lives in mystery and fear. Superstition will drag him down. The rain will erode the deeds of his life, and that man who sets himself the task of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry will be the decision alone have taken charge of the world, will by that decision alone have taken charge of the world, and it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate. And then Toadvine, obviously a more simple mind, says, I don't see what that has to do with catching birds. And then the judge responds, the freedom of birds is an insult to me. I'd have them all in zoos. That is like the most evil, egotistical thing ever. Like that line. So this whole book I read maybe 6 months back. Definitely have to read it again because it was so good. But I finished this book 6 months back, and obviously the story and the mental image of the landscape and the journey and everything is obviously painted in my mind. And it's one of those books that I'll definitely never forget that vibe. But the one line that stuck with me for 6 months that I just, oftentimes it just pops into my head and I think about from time to time is, whatever exists, he said, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. And then he goes on to talk about how yet the smallest crumb can devour us. Any small thing beneath yon rock without man's knowing. Only nature can enslave man, and only when the existence of each last entity is rooted out and made to stand naked before him will he properly suzerain of the earth. Basically, in order to rule over man and in order to rule over absolutely everything, as he says, a suzerain. And then he says, like the other guy asked him, why not just say a keeper, an overlord? He said, because a suzerain is a special kind of keeper. A suzerain rules even where there are other rulers. His authority counter man's local judgments. So basically, to rule over everything is to understand everything. And that like last line where he says, the freedom of birds is an insult to me. I'd have them all in zoos. Like he's like, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. Like I have to understand absolutely everything, and only then will I have absolute power over everything. Now, obviously, that's it's evil, it's egotistical, but I think it's definitely a very true thing in life, where it's like, basically that just boils down to knowledge is power. If you don't understand something and someone else does, they have the power to use that thing against you. Knowledge is power. Like in the most simplistic terms, if two countries are at war, one is more technologically advanced, even if the other country B has more manpower, the men are, let's say, more able-bodied, they're bigger, they're stronger. That doesn't really matter if country A is way more technologically advanced. Like, it doesn't really matter if you have 1 million guys if they're going against 10,000 guys with automatic machine guns and RPGs. That story of the Persians who attacked 300 Spartans and the Spartans held them up. It's not about having more men, it's about having better tactics, better technology, just better information. And by understanding life and understanding as much as you can out of the universe, how physics works, chemistry works, math, all these things that then will give you the edge and give you the ability to win battles that even when you're, let's say, outclassed, outmatched, it just allows you to perform. That's obviously on a more macro scale, but even if we bring it more micro, even on in interpersonal relations, maybe you with someone else, maybe as simple as they understand human psychology and manipulation tactics better than you do, and they can get you to do things and manipulate you by playing on your emotions, on your tendencies, on your wants, but you're naive to all these things because you don't understand that these tactics are possible, that they exist, and that people use them. Now, I don't think this line would have the same effect if it was told by a different character in this book. I think if they took the kid who's basically more of like an innocent kid with a bad background who kind of stumbled upon this life, it wouldn't have the same effect. But the judge in this book, I'm not gonna like spoil it, but the judge is this character who's, you can tell, just like an evil character who wants control, who wants absolute power of things. So for him to say this, for him to say, if it exists in creation without my knowledge, it exists without my consent. Obviously, yeah, like it's good for good people, good-hearted people to understand things, but it's equally important to understand that bad people can use things against you. It's absolutely a race. It's absolutely player versus player in life. And if someone is operating against your best interests, either like intentionally, or you're just caught in the crossfire of it. But if someone is operating without your best intentions at heart and they know things that you don't, they can absolutely use those things against you. Now, the flip side of that is you being hopefully a good person, you can learn as much as you can and use those things to accomplish good goals and good noble pursuits. If it exists, if creation exists without my knowledge, it exists without my consent. Like, learn absolutely everything you can, because you can use that to get you things. Me, I'm an engineer. You quite literally just get paid money for what you know. People pay you because you can design things. There are physical and chemical first principle understandings and fundamentals that you understand down to the root, down to their core, that you will base your designs off of. And in exchange for doing this, in exchange for having this knowledge and doing this mental work, then you get money. Yeah. Knowledge is power. I feel like everyone obviously understands that, but maybe not so in depth. Like, maybe it's not something you think about that often, and maybe you should, because I think this book has done a really good job of like making me always reflect on that. Like, that quote always pops back into my mind of basically understand absolutely everything you can. No knowledge is waste. My dad always said, he said, knowledge is an easy thing to carry. It's like, oh yeah, well, like, back at school, back in elementary or high school, I'm like, yeah, like they made us learn all this stuff and it seems useless and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know where I would ever use it. And my dad would say, knowledge is a very easy thing to carry. No knowledge is wasted. You will never learn something and then be like, why the fuck do I know this? This is a waste of my brain space. Like, you're never gonna run out of space in your mind. You might as well learn absolutely everything you can. And it's going to be used at some point, and a lot of times it manifests it's in ways that you definitely did not think they would. Like, you'll learn something, and the application of that and how it actually applies and benefits your life way down the road is super random, but you are always thankful that you did take the time and effort to learn things. So basically, I guess the whole point of this video is to just basically say, read this book, spend special attention to page 207, and learn absolutely everything you can, so that A, it can't be used against you, and B, so that you can use it to accomplish noble pursuits. I don't see what this has to do with catching birds. The freedom of birds is an insult to me. I'd have them all in zoos. A lot of times, these like bad people too will want to have all this information, learn everything they can about the birds, but they want to have them in zoos so no one else can learn about it. They want to gatekeep that knowledge. I think it's an absolutely beautiful thing. Libraries and free books and free exchanges of knowledge. For the longest time in history, knowledge, like science and math knowledge, has always been kind of reserved for nobles and rich people. Like it took a lot of money to go to school, university. Most people, obviously, talking way back in the day, 1700s and past that, like an average person who worked on a farm or labor would ever have the money to send their child to school. Now, knowledge has never been more available. Now, obviously, misinformation as well, but just pure knowledge has never been more available and more vast. And I would say there's never been an easier time to just learn things. And you absolutely should. And if you don't take the time and effort to actually learn things, it's basically saying you aren't the master of your own destiny. If you don't take the time to actually plan out your life and apply yourself to things and learn things, you're just going to kind of get pushed around by the momentum of life and just end up doing whatever the system wants you to do. The man who believes that the secrets of the world are forever hidden in mystery and fear, superstition will drag him down. The rain will erode deeds of his life. But that man who sets himself the task of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry will by that decision alone have taken charge of the world. And it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate. Only when you actually believe I can learn things and I can learn things to do things, and this knowledge will get me places, get me into rooms, get me things that I want, noble pursuits, noble things. It is only that man who sets himself the task of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry. So figuring out, like, there's a whole bunch, there's a tapestry out there. There's a bunch of chaos. There's a bunch of bullshit. There's a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. But you single out the thread of order. You find the things that really, truly matter. And will, by that decision alone, have taken charge of the world. And it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate. It is only in singling out order in the chaos that you will actually dictate the terms of your own fate. Great book, read it. Knowledge is absolute power. If it exists in nature without my knowledge, it exists without my consent. Thank you.